Well, hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the political editor of The Sun, Harry Cole, and the political editor of the Daily Mirror, Pippa Crerar, with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome to both of you. So, to the front pages then, we're starting with the Metro, which has the big news of the night. Businessman Elon Musk poised to buy Twitter for an estimated £35 billion. The FT's international edition also features the news about Elon Musk and Twitter, but leads with word of panic buying in Beijing over fears of a new lockdown there. Daily Mirror reports on the story of the 4 people who were stabbed to death at a house in southeast London with the headline Bloodbath. Lockdown and social distancing have been linked to a surge of hepatitis cases in young children. That's on the front of the Telegraph. The Guardian says the Health Secretary is being encouraged to relax the law to allow pharmacists to amend prescriptions if there are shortages of medicines such as HRT. And on the front of The Sun, pubs will be allowed to stay open longer during the Queen's Platinum Jubilee weekend. Quick reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages while you watch us. Still a few to come in, I note. Well, Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar are here. And let's kick off, shall we, Pippa, with Twitter, the breaking news of this evening. The world's richest man with an agenda on free speech buys tech. Quite a shake-up, I guess.
Yes, it's a big moment, isn't it? I mean, Harry and I are amongst those journalists who spend quite a lot of time on Twitter. So it's going to be interesting to see how it changes in the weeks and months ahead. Now, Elon Musk, the world's richest man, has obviously had his eye on the social media platform for some time. He's tweeted in the past about being interested in buying it. And in recent weeks, we have seen a sort of a gradual takeover bid, which at first was resisted by the board. They issued a poison pill to prevent the takeover, but they seem to have come to an agreement now, and that deal is now going ahead. Now, Musk is, as you know, a fairly idiosyncratic character, and he has in the past used Twitter to sort of make his case for free speech. I think the big question that everyone's going to be asking is whether that desire to reinstate what he regards reinstate free speech on Twitter will mean allowing Donald Trump back onto the platform. He, of course, was banned last year for inciting unrest at the Capitol on the platform. And it'd be interesting to see whether Elon Musk will put into practice his own sort of desire for expanding that free speech by no longer blocking some of his critics, for example, journalists that have written rather critical things about his companies or indeed him. So it's going to be a really interesting time for those of us that use Twitter regularly to see what changes are going to be coming down the line.
Yes, and from a business point of view, everybody's kind of asked over the years, why has Twitter not grown to Facebook-esque proportions, Harry? And there's something about the future in Elon Musk, is there not? You know, his companies, his ideas, you know, he sees things possibly that others do not, despite some of those criticisms, as we heard from Pippa. So what could he do with it?
Well, if the howls of derision tonight from the majority of Twitter users of the left they're going absolutely bananas tonight. It's absolutely fantastic. There's talks of mass walkouts. It could make it all a bit more of a pleasant place to be around. There's been some interesting suggestions that Elon Musk has made. One, he will make people on there accountable. He's promised to rid Twitter of anonymous trolls, and you have to authenticate yourself if you want an account. Now, Pippa and I would both know, and you, Anna, and lots of anyone that appears on any form of television, radio, or puts their name in print will know that anonymous trolls are, you know, the sewer of cesspit of social media is never far away. So if you can come up with the goods on that, then it can only be a good thing. However, there's this view with Elon Musk that he's the wrong sort of billionaire. He's the wrong sort of success story because he's leaning to the right, slightly libertarian, has endorsed not endorsed Donald Trump, but been more supportive than others of Donald Trump. You know, there are screams that this is outrageous. And I've just been quite amused by the reaction tonight because when Donald Trump was banned from Twitter, everyone, you know, all these lefty commentators in America all screamed, well, you know, it's a private company. They can do what they want. If you don't like it, you can leave. And now they don't like the owner of it. They're suddenly suggesting that somehow Twitter should be brought into public ownership as some sort of global forum owned by the people, and you can't have these things both ways. You got to pick and choose these battles, and they're trying to have their cake and eat it, I think, tonight.
Yes, that fear of cesspit Twitter returning takes us to our next story, which is in the Metro. What happened over the weekend to the Deputy Labour leader? Comments today by Boris Johnson after this Mail on Sunday article. Your thoughts on this, Pippa?
Yes, well, we've seen widespread condemnation of the thrust of the article, the anonymous comments from a Tory MP about Angela Rayner, fairly sort of sexist. Summon the editor of the Mail on Sunday, the newspaper that this article appeared in, to speak to him about it. He's obviously not very happy about it either. But I think that there's a couple of things I'd say. One is that there's a feeling, certainly amongst journalists, that journalists in general shouldn't be punished for reporting what MPs are saying, and that it's very important often that we have the capacity to expose what's going on and what people are thinking without the fear of their passes being taken off them or being censored. But secondly, I think that newspapers obviously have a responsibility to think about how those stories are told. And I think any of us would agree that the way that particular story was told was not sensitive. Indeed, it was fairly offensive, particularly to Ms. Rayner herself, but also to women MPs across the Commons more generally. And I think that there's a feeling that story could have been told in another way. Angela Rayner embroiled in a sexism scandal, perhaps being more critical of some of the words that were issued by this anonymous Tory MP. But I think that political journalists will be watching this quite carefully, because it's potentially a slippery slope. And while it's one thing, the Speaker making his displeasure known to, standing up for MPs and making his displeasure known to the editor of a national newspaper, I think that they need to be quite careful that they aren't seen, as some might see it, to overstep the mark. And stop journalists being able to report on some of this stuff. This isn't what the Metro's got into. The Metro's obviously got into sexism more broadly in the Commons, but I'm sure Harry will have some views on that.
Well, let's ask about the specifics of this as well, because the person who wrote it was the person who succeeded you in the role, I understand. Is that right? And no, not quite.
Not quite. Don't know, but I used to work at the Mail on Sunday. That's no secret. And used to work with that team. It's a brilliant team of professional journalists. I think they probably got this one wrong. As Pippa said, there's always a way to tell a story. It's the presentation of it, I think, that upset a lot of people. That said, I totally agree with Pippa that it is not for politicians to decide who and how stories are covered. Yes, by all means, as everyone from the Prime Minister downwards done today and yesterday, make your views known. But when you start hauling in editors and, you get into as Pippa said, a very slippery slope very quickly of that role between the fourth estate and politics that needs to remain combustible.
Yeah, the Mac cartoon goes with this, doesn't it? Front page of the Telegraph as well. Angela Rayner, most Tory MPs are still distracted by the statue of Lady Thatcher. Not sure that's quite true on any level, to be fair. But anyway, the point being made, I suppose, that it puts women off entering the House of Commons, and it's not the first time we've heard, elements of sexism, misogyny, or whatever, however you want to describe it. Pippa, just quickly on this one then, how do they move forward, really, in terms of treatment of women, etc.?
I think the single biggest way is to call it out, and it's not just for the women in Parliament to call it out, it's also for the men, the high-profile journalists like Harry, but also the senior male politicians like the Prime Minister and the Speaker, to make it clear that it's not acceptable to address that sort of misogyny and hatred towards women, but also not just what's done publicly, but also what goes on behind the scenes. And there's all sorts of allegations being investigated by the Commons authorities about sexism and about bullying, and in some cases sexual assault. And that the Commons is still in the process of getting its processes in order. They're not there yet. I think there's a feeling generally that the Commons authorities need to do more on that as well.
After Wimbledon decided to ban Russian tennis players, it is the proms that now has this debate. Daily Telegraph reporting that the BBC is to allow Russian musicians to appear at the proms, provided they have publicly or privately voiced opposition to the invasion of Ukraine. If they plan to return home to Russia anytime soon, that will be very tricky for them, Harry.
Yeah, of course it will. And again, we get into this sort of who is the moral arbiter on these things, and who appoints the judges on these facts. If you take the Wimbledon, for example, lots of Russian-born tennis players, now live long, successful lives in other countries. They are as critical as of Putin's invasion as many others. There's that famous shot, I can't remember the name of the tennis player, but the guy who wrote on the camera while appearing at a tennis match, no war. And they've been sort of blanket banned from sporting events. And it does seem to me like the proms are trying to take a slightly more nuanced approach to that, in that you can come and perform if you sort of publicly denounce your allegiances to your country. Again, I'm not sure. Let's see if it works, but it does just sit slightly uncomfortably with me that we're getting into a sort of it's not a comfortable place for anyone to be in when we're sort of demanding people swear fealty to one cause or another before being allowed to perform in the arts. That's it's a slippery slope again. I know we keep saying that tonight.
Indeed so. Well, stay there with you. Plenty more still to come. We'll be taking a look at this story on the front of the Daily Telegraph, which reports a children's hepatitis outbreak linked to lockdown, or the effects of lockdown at least. Back in just a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now are the political editors of The Sun and the Mirror, Harry Cole and Pippa Crerar. Welcome back to both of you. Let's go to The Guardian, shall we? This idea of getting civil servants back to work. The Guardian is suggesting that the UK's top civil servant has privately warned Boris Johnson against forcing government workers back to the office amid growing anger. Tell us more, Harry.
Yeah, interesting one, this one, because the Prime Minister very clearly today came out and said he's backing all initiatives to get people back, civil servants in Whitehall, back to the office. Now, they published some figures the other day that's ranged from 70% of the MOD are back down to just 25% of officials are back working in Whitehall in the Department for Education. Now, that will stick in the claw, I think, for quite a few teachers around this country who have been battling through the classroom, risking at times their own health by keeping schools open and throughout this pandemic. And actually, lots of civil servants are back at home. Now, the government are very keen to, some elements of government, it feels a little bit like it's a new front on the sort of culture war, that they're making this sort of work from home thing a bit of a driving mission for them, for the Rees Moggs of this world. But at the end of the day, actually, the ministers privately say, look, there's a direct correlation between the departments that have been the most hit in the scandal and headlines for all the wrong reasons over the last few months. Take the Home Office, for example, or the Foreign Office, if you think back to the Afghanistan bungle. Those are the ones that have some amongst the lowest rates of civil servants back in the office. And the departments that have been ticking along quite well actually have much better rates of people back. Now, look, there is obviously going to be a change post-pandemic, that there could be more flexible working, but 75% of the office not being back, you begin to wonder. I begin to have a little bit of sympathy for those saying, actually, we're not firing on all cylinders.
Yes, and in fact, the Times is just in. It kind of relates in the suggestion that summer holidays are at risk, this paper says, as the Passport Office struggles to deal with a huge surge in demand for new passports. A lot of businesses are struggling because people are off with COVID. So it's still kind of going on if you're back in the office. So that's one of the issues. I've also got the Daily Mail in as well. In fact, let's just show you that GPs are set to vote at a medical conference on whether to reduce their surgery opening hours, suggesting it could be to 5 p.m. It's a far cry from what Jeremy Hunt wanted, isn't it? Of, open all hours, effectively. But let's go to our final story, which relates to health too. It's in the Telegraph. This idea of hepatitis and a specific type of virus which may be causing it, which children were less exposed to, I guess, Pippa.
Yeah, it's really worrying, this, isn't it? I mean, it's one of the, it's a case that the UK HSA is looking into, the Health Security Agency, and suggesting that one of the factors might be the fact that children, young children, and it's generally under fives, didn't come into contact with other kids and therefore with sort of common viruses as they might have done normally during the periods of lockdown, and even sort of either side of the lockdown periods. Social distancing and so on was in place. So they're obviously not for very young children. That would be impossible to enforce, as any parent knows. But the concern is that these kids weren't exposed to as much of these adenoviruses, they're called, which 3/4 of these cases of hepatitis, 114 so far in the country, amongst children of that age group, are linked to. And, it's really worrying. 10 kids in the UK have required liver transplants as a result, and while the majority recover, there are clearly some children that are extremely ill. They made it very clear that this has nothing to do with the coronavirus vaccine. Obviously, children of that age group haven't had the vaccine yet anyway, but it does look like that it's one of sort of these unexplained and really rather worrying impacts of lockdown that at the time, obviously, the decision was made for all the right reasons and all the right motivations, but beyond the widely accepted fallout on widely understood fallout on children's mental health and sort of physical health. This is a very specific example of a potentially very dangerous disease, hepatitis, which is affecting young children, and I think a lot of parents will be really worried about.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though the figures, it has to be said, are still fairly low, aren't they? As you said, 114 cases of this acute hepatitis of unknown origin, as they describe it. Thank you both very much indeed. Great to have you on. Thank you.